So it's funny, so we've been on VinWiki now, I would say 10 episodes, probably 8 to 10 episodes. And I think when we first thought about what we were gonna tell and the different stories, we were gonna tell obviously the most exciting stories and the stories that had a great ending and really sort of uplifting stories. This is probably the scariest situation that we've ever been in. And it's funny because we've had a lot of feedback from people and they've, oh, we want to hear more stories. And we could go on and on, honestly, for years. But this has to be probably the craziest story, or one of the craziest stories I've ever heard in the car world. And it actually happened to us. So this is about 3 years ago. I get a phone call and it's from a very, very good friend, a family friend. It's a gentleman that was probably one of the first guys buying Ferrari 275s and Lamborghini Miuras, imagine in the late 60s and early 70s. And he had always a small dealership, but really, really great stuff. He's owned Ferrari Superfast and some really important cars. He's probably not that famous on the internet, but he is a legend. I mean, this guy is a legend. He knows his shit. So when he called me, I really assume anytime he calls me, it's something important. So he called me and told me that he had found a Lamborghini Miura SV basically in the jungle in Brazil. He's not the type of guy that's, really computer savvy or whatnot. So I started digging for Miura SVs and I started digging history as were there any cars in Brazil, and I really couldn't find anything online about a Miura SV in Brazil. So I asked him for more information. I said, we want the car, we're very interested. He said he wasn't sure the exact condition, but he was told that it was in a very poor condition. So a week goes by, blah, blah, blah. And he basically says that, yes, the car is available. It's Argento, so pretty rare. I think there was 4 or 5 Miura SVs made in silver, and it actually had 10,000 original miles, which is very low. So obviously, Curated, we're really excited about the low mileage. I started chasing him. I want the car, I want the car, I want the car. And we were sort of, I would say, in a battle of the value. The seller, as most sellers, thought it was worth X. We thought it was worth this. And we actually ended up coming to a price, and sort of shockingly, before even seeing the car. So we had agreed to just a number just less than $2 million, which was a lot of money for a Miura SV that we knew was gonna need work. So I, at the time, and I don't remember exactly why, but I was not in the position, I think, I don't know, I was getting over a cold. I was not gonna go to Brazil to see this car. It's a long trip, and it was in a place where it was gonna take, if I flew into Sao Paulo, it was gonna take me another couple hours to get there. So we had actually had a really good friend and colleague of ours that was in Brazil. He knew nothing about Miuras, but I created like a diagram that he could literally, it was like, Miura for dummies. I mean, you could literally walk around the car with my diagram and find this number and that number. So mind you, to this moment, we've never seen photos of the car. All we know, it's silver and it does need work. So I think we buy his plane ticket, and literally he was there the next day. He lived about an hour away outside of this area, and he arrives, and he's telling me through WhatsApp, he arrives to like this warehouse. He goes into this warehouse, and he basically just sees parts. And it's not just parts, but these parts, the way he was describing to me, he was like, bro, why would you buy this? It's junk. Like, it's garbage. So I start getting photos from him, and I am completely shocked. It's probably one of the worst conditions of a car that I had seen in a very long time. It looked like the car had been like submerged in water. If you've ever seen artifacts from the Titanic, or and it literally looked like something out of that Titanic. There wasn't a bolt or an inch of the car that didn't have some surface rust or some major rust. It wasn't like there was rust holes through the car, but it just looked like the car had been very poorly stored. The front hood was off, the wheels were off, all of the suspension was off of the car. So imagine it's the center section of a Miura, which is like it's a monocoque, and then you have the rear hood, and that was it. There's no paint on the car. Most of the parts of the engine, so all of the carburetors were off, and everything's in boxes. So he's sending me all these photos of just like a headlight in a box and a lens in a box. And meanwhile, he's talking to the owner, and the owner's saying nothing is missing on the car. Everything's complete except for door glass windows. So we're trying to sort through everything. I'm inventory everything. Obviously, there's things missing. And the car was completely in disrepair. But still, a 10,000 mile, one owner, silver black Miura SV. And the real question was, like, who would let this car totally get to such a bad state of honestly disrepair, or whatever you want to call it, in Brazil? Ends up, it's a long story, but the car was originally delivered to Portugal new. 4936 was the chassis number. 1971 Miura SV. It was delivered to a famous lawyer. This Portuguese lawyer, for some reason, he was in the press a lot in the 70s and 80s, left Portugal, imported the car and brought the car to Brazil and drove around in Brazil in this car. At some point in the 80s, he decided, I guess he wanted to change the color of the car to red, strip the car, and that's how the car sat for that many years. The car didn't look like it had any accidents. It didn't look like it had been in a fire. It was just literally in pieces, and probably all of the elements, salt, I mean, whatever it was, attacked this poor car. The interior was complete, but it was just, there was mildew, there was must. So we ended up sort of, and I would say in a very scary way, we ended up agreeing to buy this car. There was a lot of doubts. Imagine you have a car that's almost $2 million in a country that I don't think at this point has an extradition treaty with the US. I mean, there's a lot of, political things going back and forth with the US. Even on the trade side and import-export, importing cars into Brazil is very difficult, and exporting things out of Brazil could be very difficult. Luckily, what we found out was that the owner actually had a physical address in Fort Lauderdale, and I guess he had some company ties and family ties to Florida. So we agreed that we would put a deposit, and I think it was just under $100,000, and we would proceed with buying the car. We wanted to check all the export documents, and then we wanted to try to organize this almost mess. Would we start to put the car back together? Would we crate everything? So it was going to be a logistical nightmare to bring it to the US as it is. As we're sort of negotiating this process, we actually find a dear friend of mine, a major collector in Europe. Now he's a dear friend. At the time, he was just going to be a client, and he was interested in the car. He wanted a silver Miura SV. So we start negotiating. We agreed on a price to sell him the car, and he flies to the US to meet me, and we're already engaging in, okay, how are we going to restore it and what we're going to do. So we send the deposit. We have an agreement that the car and the funds would be released once the car was actually at the shipping sort of agent and the car was ready for export. We didn't want to take the risk of sending the funds to Brazil and then waiting for this car to get here. So I think we sent 90,000 or something like that. And we waited. And we waited for responses. We waited for signed contracts back about the shipping process. And weeks went by. And eventually almost a month went by. And then months went by. And the communication with the seller who had our deposit started to get more limited and limited and limited. Actually, at one point, we asked that we wanted to do another inspection of the car and maybe help organize the parts, and he actually denied us access. So imagine, this is 2 years ago, so now we're a little bit of a bigger company, we've got bigger inventory, we've built the company. This was sort of in the foundation of Curated. Any deposit's a lot of money, but $90,000 is a lot of money to put at risk. And really, I was so confident in the the person that introduced us that I was okay sending the money, but still we were very, very concerned about our deposit. I would say about 4 months into this, now the buyer of the car is getting, he hasn't sent us the money yet or anything, but he's getting anxious. What's going on? I'm getting anxious. And I start hearing rumors from other people about a silver Miura SV for sale in Brazil. And I'm like, wait, no. This is our car. This is not, we have a deposit, we have a contract to buy the car. So I start pressuring the owner, the seller of the car, and he goes silent. He disappears for about 2-3 months, which at that point, now I'm thinking I've lost my deposit. So I start having other people call him. I have a dear friend in the US. He's from Brazil. He speaks incredible Portuguese. He's a very sharp guy. I start thinking about our contacts. We're friends with Felipe Massa, the Formula One driver in Brazil. I start thinking of all these contacts I can use to either A, I want to buy the car, or B, I just want my money back. So this is now, fast forward, probably another month. So we're going on 5 or 6 months. And now we're concerned that we're probably going to lose our deposit. And we end up getting one day photos of the car put together. Now, mind you, it looks absolutely horrible. No paint, rust everywhere, put together in an apartment complex. And now I'm like, okay, something is super weird. So we start pushing and we're like telling the guy, we're going to prosecute you in the US, no physical threats, obviously, but now the conversation went from, yes, we'd still like to buy the Miura, what's happening, to we want our money back. I don't know if you call it good karma. I don't know if we're just that lucky sometimes. I actually don't think I have that much luck. I think my life's been a bunch of fiascos that have resulted in hard work and all these things to get us where we are today. But somehow one day we get the deposit back. And the deposit actually came from an attorney's account. So I think this seller might have got scared. I don't know what happened. We got our deposit. So we celebrated a little bit, but still we were like, what happened to this Miura? Another 6 months go by. And a friend of mine tells me that, John, you'll never believe it, that Miura you were chasing out of Brazil ended up in Italy. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, the guy wants to sell it. The guy that bought it has had a disaster of a time with this car. So I'm like, hey, we could still be interested. I don't know. We've got a bad taste. So we end up reaching out to the current owner, and we find out in this crazy circumstance that at some point when we had a deposit on the car, the seller of the car thinks he's going to start defrauding everyone. So he goes and resells the car for more money to someone else. That person, who probably was as sensible as us, constructed the same agreement that the car had to arrive at the port, it had to arrive at the shipping agent, and the funds would be released. Well, the seller apparently bribed someone in Brazil at the shipping port. So he was paid for the car, he had our deposit, and then at some point during the process, bribed someone and stole the car out of the shipping agent and sort of the export facility in Brazil. So someone in the world actually bought the car, paid close to $2 million, and the car was stolen from them while it was still in Brazil. They ended up hiring private investigators. They couldn't find the car. Apparently, the photos of the car put together in an apartment building were from when the seller stole the car back and was trying to hide the car. These photos get circulated. The private investigators are doing their research. After a month of almost searching for the seller and searching for this crook and the car, they're sitting in a coffee, sort of like a cafe in Brazil, and they're thinking, okay, we lost the money, we lost the car, and guess who walks into the cafe? The seller. So they obviously, they didn't really threaten the guy, but they basically said, hey, listen, okay, we found you, we know what's going on, we want the car back. I guess the seller got scared, I don't know what it was, and he actually gave them the car. So somehow in their own luck, they ended up getting the car back from it being stolen. They got the car back and the car ended up in Italy. We started looking into the car, and really once the car was in Italy and apart and really looking at it, I mean, it was in really bad disrepair. At that point, we had pursued other projects, and there was even a funny story. So my friend who was gonna buy the car told me, hey, you're lucky you guys got your deposit back, but most of all, you're really lucky that no one got hurt. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He goes, you'll never believe it. When they were unloading the car in Italy, some massive snake actually was hiding in the car and came out of the car. And imagine all these Italians are freaked out. There's like this Amazon snake coming out of the car. So sort of a crazy story. It taught us a huge lesson that sometimes our passion gets the best of us. Obviously, we're passionate about Miuras. We're passionate about this one owner, 10,000 mile Miura. But it was probably one of the best lessons that, you know, if you're ever dealing with anything that you're a little worried about, don't send such a large deposit. You know, we try to do business in countries that recognize certain treaties with the US. But yeah, that's our story about the Miura SV in Brazil.